Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this month's Tiger Talk. Brian Jones is with me today from the high school. We're going to talk about BAR at the high school, building assets, reducing risk. Is that right?
That's correct.
Heard it enough. I've got it down now. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. We've talked about before, but some changes in that programming this year and some things we're doing there. So we'll talk about that. Just a few updates, though, before we get to that on what's going on in the high school and in the schools. First thing I want to talk about is the operating referendum. So we ran that in the election this month, and we didn't get the result we were looking for necessarily at the high school, but that just tells us the community is saying, let's look for some other options. So we're back to the drawing board with that, looking for some alternatives. Reality is still that we had used COVID funds to help us balance our budget over the last few years, and COVID funds are going away. We're not going to have those going forward. So we need to look at what happens after that. We've been very intentional with those, trying to keep our expenditures within reason of where our revenues are, and we watch that very closely. So we need to keep thinking about what that looks like going forward. Successful passing of that referendum would have meant that increase in revenue, but it lags a whole year behind before that revenue even comes in. So we've got a little bit of time yet to figure out kind of what the next steps are. Since that election, we did meet with our financial advisors. We had some conversations there. We've also just talked about what are some alternatives, what might we need to do. Operating referendums can only be run in the fall, only in November, so it won't be until next November if we go back operating referendum route. We have some time to kind of figure that piece out. The other thing that we've talked about doing that you'll probably see, the community will see likely coming out, will be some sort of survey to say, okay, so we heard the no, so now let's talk about why and what might be supported or what might next steps look like and what might the community be looking for there. So just more information to come in the future as we continue to work for that, and we certainly appreciate the ongoing support from the community and the message that we need to find some other way to look at that budget option. So understand that. This month, updates from a few of our sites. Early childhood, all sites had Veterans Day celebrations, but early childhood called out some things they did there. The little kids, they were reading stories, they did some thank you notes, they colored pictures, made poppies, all sorts of activities happening at all the schools, and that was one of their big updates this last month there. They also, early childhood, hosts an annual turkey bingo event. That's actually taking place. We're recording today on the 18th. It's taking place this evening, and that's a fun event at Parkside with the early childhood students. Parkside also, they've really been focusing with kindergartners, first graders, now that we're back in full face-to-face instruction on behaviors and managing behaviors, what that looks like, what that feels like in all the classrooms. They do what they call their Tiger Pride passports. So the kids have all been trained on what it looks like to be respectful, responsible, and safe in the 6 key areas across the school. It's been a big focus this fall for them, and they're moving forward with all of that. They're also looking at, as we've talked about, our academic needs at all sites, and we've talked about that learning gap that exists for our kids. Parkside's really being intentional about looking at each kid individually, having data meetings, thinking about who needs what interventions and how do we provide that. So that's a big part as they're getting those, especially our littlest ones, set up and started in the school year. It's been work taking place there. Southview shared this month, they've got for Veterans Day at that site, they had our first Sergeant Ryan Brunswald. He came and he shared his military experience. Ryan's a Marshall High School grad. I remember him being in high school a few years back. It was fun to have him at Southview, visit with our kids on Veterans Day, and did some work with them. Also, Southview's done a lot of work. They partner with the college and different things. They had Coach Bigler with the basketball team from the college. They came, they did some things with the Southview kids, also led activities during Phi Ed class for an entire day. I have a son at Southview. He came home pretty excited about meeting with those basketball players and told me how tall they all were. So that was fun for those kids at Southview. Middle school was excited to call out this month, just thanks to the Pride in the Tiger Foundation. Pride in the Tiger, every year in the fall, there's a grant application for teachers to ask for some extra things to help enhance education in their classrooms, things that aren't part of our normal budget. Pride in the Tiger is a great sponsor to support things at all of our learning sites, including the parochial schools in town are part of that. Middle school received over $9,000 in grants for different things to support education in the classrooms, and we're very thankful to Pride in the Tiger for all their support and what they do for our schools. I also want to call out a big congratulations to Taylor Johnson, one of our teachers at the middle school. He was named the Mick Teacher of the Month for McDonald's this fall, just recently, and that's an honor for him to be recognized and acknowledged for all the things that he does for our kids too. High school, Brian talked about a lot of things. High school, a lot of things taking place this fall. It's always busy at the high school, always things going on there. One thing that happened recently in the middle of October, we had Honor Society hosted an annual blood drive. We had 68 students donating the gift of life, so giving blood at that level. Of course, it's the only school that has kids old enough to donate blood, but it's a nice thing that the Honor Society does for the community. Also, MHS was notified end of October that we were recognized by American Field Service, or AFS, for those of you who have been part of that program, just for our participation with AFS students. So it's an exchange student program that Marshall High School has been part of for as long as I've been around with the schools. That's been fun, recognized, allowing schools from other countries to come and participate in Marshall High School. Certainly a benefit for all of our kids to get to learn from each other, and these students coming from other countries be part of that. So that was an honor to be recognized there. Another thing that was kind of cool that took place recently with the high school, over the last year we've had this conversation. Mr. Richard Reset, he attended Marshall High School the years of 61 to 64. Yeah. In his senior year, he dropped out of high school, joined the U.S. Navy, and had to leave high school. While he was in the Navy, he earned his GED, and then he went on and got a college diploma, but he never had that high school diploma. So his family had reached out, talked with us. We looked at our policies. We talked to the school board. We were able to award him a Marshall High School diploma recently. Yep. So his family had shared a picture with us and talked about that. So that was a pretty cool event.
It was a nice picture to get of him in his military uniform all these years later, and the smile on his face was made our efforts worth it.
Certainly did, yeah. Something that we don't get to see very often.
Correct.
But yeah, nice to recognize that, and certainly his service to our country with everything. Another thing, talking about experience we don't get very often for our kids, last week we had a Holocaust survivor come to the high school, gave a presentation. He's an author, talked about just his experiences and what amazing story this man has to tell. Fred Amram was his name. He met with the student body, had 2 presentations. We get everyone kind of in the theater, a chance to hear from him. Got to hear about that, and there's some of those stories, if we don't take time to intentionally tell them and have that conversation, those stories are lost.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was nice. Rick Purrington with the Honor Society, I believe he helped organize that event.
Correct.
Yeah, so it was a nice event for our students to be able to participate in and just hear that firsthand.
Yep.
Maytech is joining the high school on December 5th. We have a presentation from Tony Hoffman, is the presenter's name. Our nurses and counselors between all of our secondary levels, they wrote a grant. They got that they were awarded to have Tony come in and speak to the students. Tony once was homeless. He was in prison. He turned his life around. He made it into Olympics as a BMX bike racing coach, something I don't know a whole lot about, but certainly had a big turnaround in his life, and he's going to come talk to our kids about his life experiences. And
he was actually a professional athlete, younger as a BMX racer, and that was one of his goals, was to become an Olympic athlete, and then got involved with some chemicals and substances, and his life took a big detour.
Yeah.
So we're excited. He'll be speaking to students also at Marshall Middle School, so grades 5 through 12.
Yeah, that'll be a good experience for our kids to get to hear that. And anytime they can hear it firsthand and really hear what's going on, it's great for the kids. A lot of exciting things happening. Great opportunities for our students. Activities-wise, it's been a busy fall with activities, as it tends to be. We have great student athletes, and just a few things that maybe not everyone's aware of we want to call out and recognize a little bit this month, too. Certainly, volleyball team winning state championship has been exciting. I think the community's all heard about that. But some other things took place as well I want to call out. Nikki Bell has been our swim coach for a number of years. Nikki has said she's not returning in that position for next year, so she's really done a nice job with the program. We want to make sure we acknowledge her and thank her for all of her work with our swim team. We had a lot of recognition for different individuals in the district. Chidi Wakama was named District Player of the Year this fall.
In football.
In football, in football. Terry Ballman, our football coach, was named District Coach of the Year. Maybe not everyone's heard that. It's exciting for him. And some volleyball players named to the all-tournament team. Leah Jones, your daughter, Caitlin Christensen, Lauren Weary, and Randy Wendorf were all named to that all-tournament team. So very exciting for these girls. They had an amazing season, and nice to recognize the work that they've done.
All of our fall activities had a great fall season. Girls cross country finished 3rd at the state meet, and that really sets the tone for the whole school year when you have a good fall season, and now we're fall musical and winter sports. Girls hockey had their first game already, so there's not much downtime. We roll from one season right into the other.
Kind of right from one thing to another. It
It
certainly
is,
does. Yeah,
yes.
exciting for the kids, and there's always something to do, a way to be involved
There
and
is.
included in the school. So that's
Yep.
that's great for kids. The other thing I want to call out that maybe not everyone knows, Robbie Goodman. She's worked with our district for years.
Yes.
Robbie officiated the 4A volleyball championship match. That's a
Yes.
huge achievement for her to be able
Yep.
to do that. So we want to recognize Robbie and just thank her for all of her work there too. That's
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
exciting to do that.
Her and her husband Doug have been longtime volleyball officials and have been officiated at the state tournament for many, many years. So that was fun to look
Yeah.
over and see Robbie on that up on that platform as the lead official in that championship game.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
excited.
That is exciting. And some of those things that people maybe don't hear about that are,
Correct.
all these experiences coming out of Marshall. That's great.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to talk about BAR a bit today, Brian. So we
Sure.
said building assets, reducing risks. So
Yep.
just why don't you start off? Let's talk about what is the BAR model?
Sure.
What is that?
Well, the BAR model is really a program that has a lot of strategies that schools can use to help their students be more successful. It's designed primarily or originally for ninth grade students as they transition into high school. And one of the things that we have seen is that educators are very good relationship builders. But our system as a school isn't necessarily aligned very well for that. It's really a factory model where, and if the viewers think about their high school experience, you go from one class for a period of time, usually 50 minutes, and then you move to the next class. And while you're there, the focus is on curriculum and content. It's not about relationships. And so what BAR does is it really kind of disrupts that model of education by being very intentional about focusing on relationships. And those relationships are teacher to student, student to student, but also teacher to teacher, and then using real-time data to try to help students maximize their potential. And we know that when you have a relationship with students, they will work very hard for you. And when you don't have a relationship with students, it's easy for that student to maybe disengage and
Absolutely.
fly under the radar.
When we talk about meeting individual need and this personalized instruction, differentiating to meet different kids' needs,
Yep.
that's been a big focus in our district for years.
Yep.
So one of those things that lends itself easier sometimes to the elementary model, where a teacher has a student for most, if not all, of the day, and that's much harder model to implement at the high school. So that's
Yep.
that's really what it's taking some of those same philosophies and looking at how does this work with older kids and
Yep.
different schedules and that sort of
And
thing.
really
So-
kind of reorganizes that
Right.
just to make it work and adjust in the system.
Right. So thinking about that, what is
Yep.
the history of the BAR model?
Well, the BAR model, it's research-based and research-proven, and it's gone through about 30 different various research studies from the U.S. Department of Education to ACT to What Works in Education and all sorts of research groups to investigate this model. But it started back in 1999 in St. Louis Park.
In Minnesota. Yeah.
At St. Louis Park High School. And it's just evolved from there. And currently it's in over 40 high schools in Minnesota, more than 200 high schools throughout the country, and has impacted over 200,000 students in the last 23, 24 years.
This wasn't Brian
So-
in the back office
No,
on a napkin
no.
coming up with some model, something to do. There's
No.
research behind
That's
this.
right. And so it started in Marshall back in the fall of 2019. There was a group of teachers who came to us and just said, we need some more training to meet the needs of the students that we're seeing right now. And our students have changed in the last 20 years, just as they do with every generation, and have new needs and needed different supports. And so we started investigating that, and BAR reached out to us. They were part of had received a large Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant, and we're working with the Network for Schools Improvement. And so they were looking for schools in Minnesota, Illinois, and California, and they wanted a variety of schools in Minnesota. They wanted some urban and metropolitan. They wanted some rural schools that had demographic diversity, and so while we were looking, they approached us, and so we were very intentional and listened to what they had to offer, and went through kind of a few listening sessions and met with our district office staff and just said, what do we think about this? And so we started, we committed to it, and then we had our first training, and then COVID. and that was in the spring of 2020. And so that next fall, we started with a small pilot group. They consisted of about 1/3 of our ninth grade class that year, and we were learning as we were implementing, and we were still managing COVID and hybrid and distance and hybrid and full, and so that year was interesting and challenging. Yeah. And so we stayed with that same course last year and said, let's keep focusing on this, still on 1/3 of our ninth graders. And as we moved through the year last year and had those students with us all the time, our teachers really started to see the benefits of that. And so last spring we made a decision that as we started the fall of 2022, we were going to implement this model with all of our ninth grade students. And so that's where we're at today. Yeah. We're in the process of doing that, and we're learning what works and what adjustments we need to make, and we've been really happy with what we're seeing so far and how we think it's progressing.
That's awesome. So let's kind of talk a little bit about what does this look like in the school? What is different with BARR?
Yeah, so BARR has kind of their foundation relies on 8 specific strategies, and so the first off is it places groups of students into cohorts with teacher teams and student teams. And at Marshall High School, we have 3 teacher teams, 3 student teams, and then those students work within those teacher groups. And so those teacher groups consist of a social studies teacher, a language arts teacher, and a science teacher. And so those are kind of the 3 groups that we work with. And so that's one of those 8 strategies.
So it's sticking with core classes that every student would have.
It really is. Yep. And then student center mixed with their electives, but really the primary, the focus is on the whole student. It's not just about the student's academic performance, but it's about their social, emotional well-being, their maturity, their academic, how things are going at home. And so that's really one of those first strategies. Another strategy that BARR relies heavily on is professional development. And so on next Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, our other high school teachers will be out doing some business and community tours. Our teachers who teach within the BARR program will be staying behind to do some specific professional development. The third strategy is using what's called iTime, and iTime has nothing to do with Apple products or technology, but really it's a curriculum where our teachers commit to using that for 1 period a day, and it takes about 30 minutes, and it's just a way to help build that social emotional learning, build a sense of community within that class, let those students get to know each other better, let the students get to know the teacher better, and so we've just seen some really good effects, and our teachers gain very valuable data from that and understand what's important to those students, what works well for them, what's maybe a trigger for them, and some things that we want to avoid. So that's the third strategy. The fourth, like I mentioned, is creating those cohorts of students. And again, currently we have 3. Most of our students probably don't have any idea that they're even part of a cohort, right. But we just use that for our data collection and our scheduling more than anything. The fifth strategy is holding regular meetings. So our teachers give up their part of their prep period for 2 days a week. Their first time they meet just with that group of teachers. The second time they meet with a group of counselors, administrators, and where we talk about students, how they're doing. We brainstorm interventions to try with them and ways to help those students become more successful. The next one would be we bring in a larger team, and we call that a community connect meeting. So we bring in our professionals from the community, substance use counselor, our Marshall, our school resource officer, our school psychologist, just to try to help if there are some students who are really struggling with some problems that are larger than just being at school. How can we help and support that? Human services and trying to bring in all of our total community to try to support that student, with the idea that prevention is often much more effective than than a reactionary process.
Yeah.
And then finally, engaging families in the learning process. And so this year we've started with a parent advisory council for our 9th grade students. And they were excited when they heard about this program, and we had a chance to explain that to them. And then finally is engaging the school administration. And so certainly I'm an advocate for the BAR program and the BAR model. And so just trying to make sure that the system, the BAR model, has the support it needs at the school leadership level.
Right. So you talk about the language arts teacher, the science teacher, social studies teacher. Those might be the 3 key teachers, but we're not just looking at grades for those classes. We're looking at all across the school. So just how does this work within Marshall High School?
Yeah, so our 9th grade teachers, each teacher is responsible for of those 9th grade teachers, responsible for a certain number of students, and they look at that every student, every class, every week. And so, you think of it almost as, I'll use the term, a mother hen who's watching over that group of students, but they're looking at not just in their class, but they're looking at all of that student's classes. And then when we meet, if there's an issue a student is having, we see some low grades, then that teacher is reaching out to that student's other teachers to schedule a time for that student to get in and get some support. Maybe it's at lunch, or it's before school or after school, or what do we need to do? Can you send some work my way that I can have them do? And so it really increases the collaboration that is happening amongst the educators in the building, as opposed to people just going into their room and operating in a silo and teaching, here's what I teach this content, and the bell rings and everyone goes to the next class, and I get a new group and I apply that same educational practice to that next group.
Right. Which is easy to do when you have a lot of kids kind of coming and going throughout the day, and you get focused on what's going on in my room with my kids. You might lose focus that Brian's struggling not just in my class, but he's struggling in these other classes. What's going on?
Or and you're exactly right. And if that student is doing very well in your class but struggling in my class, now I've got a teacher I can go to and say, hey, explain to me, because you've connected with this young person and I'm struggling. Give me some tips and some strategies to try. And so it's really improved the communication within those educators who teach those 9th grade students in our building.
Right. So everyone's goal is what's in the best interest of each kid. So,
yep.
Good. So how long did you say Marshall's been working with the BAR model?
Yeah, so we started in the fall of 2019, but it takes a while to get started. So I would say we really started in the fall of 2020. So this is our 3rd year. Our first group that we worked with are now juniors. Yep. And so that's been fun to watch their evolution and their growth. And our teachers will still say that juniors or sophomores will come up to them and say, hey, do you still look at my grades each week? Because I really am doing well, and I've turned things around. And so those are fun and success stories that we like to hear. But what made this possible is we received a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant. And so the idea is that those 30 schools working together can make improvements quicker than any one school working alone. And so we just earlier this week had a meeting, and the Marshall High School group was in a meeting with teachers out of a high school in Peoria, Illinois. And it's good for us to broaden our perspective and hear what some of those successes are and what some of those challenges are in other schools, particularly when you're talking in whether it be a large urban area of Chicago that might have 4,000 students, or we are talking with a school in the Valley in California that is a school that's smaller than Marshall. It helps us gain a greater perspective.
Right. So and just learn from each other.
Yes.
That's great. So you've mentioned, I know you're at the board meeting recently, you talked about successes. Yep. Let's share with our listeners a little bit, like what indications do we have that this is or isn't working?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of the things that BAR requires us to do is really look at a lot of data. And it's individual, but it's cohort data. And so we've just wrapped up Q1 at the beginning of November. And so when we went in and looked at our 9th graders and then our school as a whole, we had a higher percentage of students passing all of their classes than we've had since the 2016-2017 school year. In that year, it was only by about 1/10 of a percentage point higher. And we know our enrollment has grown quite a bit since then. And so we feel good about that we're on the right track. We're seeing decreases in students being referred to the office, and so missing class time. We're seeing attendance that, attendance rates that continue to hold steady and in some cases increase. Our goal is to have 100% of our freshmen pass all of their classes. And why we say that's important is we know when ninth graders get off to a good start and earn all of those credits, they're on track for graduation.
Right.
And it's much more difficult if you fail a few courses in high school and you sort of have to climb out of this hole. Students' levels of motivation just don't remain the same. And so we think that's something that's important, is really focus on those ninth graders, get them off to a good start. We believe each year that will help us move forward, and eventually, we want 100% of all students to graduate
Absolutely.
on time. And so we are seeing some good things with our data. In other areas, I feel like we're seeing some students take some of our advanced courses that perhaps wouldn't, because those teachers are identifying some of those students who really have some natural strengths, but maybe didn't know those pathways to navigate how to get there. And so
those personal connections.
and really trying to help those students who would be classified as maybe underserved within our school over the years to have those same opportunities to pursue those advanced degrees and schooling after graduation.
Right. I know the state of Minnesota really looks at graduation rates. It's an important measure of success of a high school of students. And the struggle we've had with that is the graduation rate data lags so far behind for us to get it back from the state. So you talked about the number of kids passing classes or percentage of kids passing classes. That's data you've used at the high school for a number of years. And it's not just at the end of the year that's look. I know you're using that every 3 weeks.
We look at that every 3 weeks, and we benchmark that against that same point last year, and we look at those cohorts and say, well, here's how our sophomores did this year. How are they doing as ninth graders? So we're trying to compare apples to apples and not one group to another group, because those students are different, but just trying to make sure that those students continue to make progress and continuous improvement. And
certainly
we want them
builds
to
towards our
continue to
mission.
improve.
If we're preparing all students for success,
Absolutely.
that's how we do that. They have to pass high school classes and
That's
graduate.
where it starts.
Absolutely. Good. How does staff feel about the BAR model?
We were intentional when we started. We started with a small group, but I would say the gauge I've looked at, in addition to what I hear from them, is that the number who have participated in the summer trainings that we've had, and right now we probably have about 80% of our staff who have been trained, and so we have a lot of folks who have been trained, but maybe don't work with ninth graders directly, because what they have learned is just it's best practice research. Again, this is a research-proven program. So I see elements of the BAR model occurring in classrooms in grade 10 and grade 11 and grade 12. It's just we are very focused on grade 9 and making sure that we have all 8 of those strategies working together.
Right. The scheduling to make that happen for the whole school, I can imagine, would be near impossible.
That would be a challenge. And so while maybe all 8 aren't present in grade 10 or grade 11 or grade 12, there might be 5 of the 8 or 4 of the 8 or 3 of the 8. But also as kids get older, they get more independent, become more self-directed, and they don't need the same level of supports as an 18-year-old that they do as a 14-year-old.
Right. We're just about out of time, Brian. So just last question for you. What comes next?
Well, we need to learn how to be better, and so focus on continuous improvement. We are 3 months into the school year, and so we're going to continue to work with this group of ninth graders. We want to make sure before we would ever consider moving it vertically, up or down in our system, that we can do it really well horizontally.
Right.
So,
Have a good model to build off of, and sounds like something would probably fit really well as we're thinking about expansion, probably going more down to lower grades and going up to higher
most
grades.
likely, yep.
Yeah. All right.
So-
Well, Brian, really appreciate you being here and for everything you're doing to support
Yep.
our kids at the
Thank
high
you.
school. This is great work. We thank you to the viewers for watching today, and we'll see you next month on Tiger Talk.